At IOI, we are dedicated to making our games more accessible by design. As we move forward in our accessibility journey, we aim to enhance our approach while maintaining our current workflows. While our upcoming titles may not be fully accessible yet, we are committed to continuous improvement. We invite everyone to prioritize accessibility in their designs and join us on this journey.
Great to have you and sort of finally do this talk. So we've been talking. I'm Josh, white male, short to medium brown hair, brown bushy beard, sort of wearing a checkered shirt. And sort of it's great to actually have you today and talk with you. I'm this sort of senior UI programmer here at IO Interactive. But that's sort of a little bit about me. Can you tell everyone sort of about yourself?
Yeah, why not? I am Sightless Combat. Well, that's what I go by pretty much throughout the video game industry. Most people just call me Sightless Combat or SK, any of those three. I am a gamer without sight, having absolutely no sight whatsoever. I've never had any sight at all. I'm an accessibility consultant, content creator, and most recently, as you might be able to see from my title, I work for RNIB, that is Royal National Institute of Blind People. That is the UK-based sight loss charity. I am the accessible gaming officer, and that is the short version of my title. but but I've been doing accessibility consultancy long before that. I joined July of last year with RNIB, and I've been doing accessibility consultancy for about 7 or 8 years before that. I'm wearing an RNIB related cap at the moment, the DFEG, the Design for Every Gamer cap, which is their new initiative they launched not last Sunday, but the Sunday before that. I was actually a part of that launch. I do a lot of YouTube videos. I do live streams on Twitch. I do stuff on Twitter as well. Putting thoughts and showing off Lego models that I'm in the middle of building, amongst other things, or a Lego model, I should say, that I'm in the middle of building with accessible instructions. So, and just as a fun side thing, I'm actually in the credits for a couple of recent games that you may have heard of, namely Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok. So, that's me. And of course, I have the big wall of stuff behind me as well. And this is where I actually stream from. So if you've seen me before and you think this background looks familiar, that's why. So no,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure to be here, and very excited to get into discussions with you all.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to have you, and it's sort of you mentioned you're a gamer without sight. I think that is worth highlighting. You have no sight at all. You still play games like Horizon, Gears, God of War, Ragnarok with amazing skill. Yeah,
Fallen Order as well. That's a fun one.
nice.
So, yeah.
So how long have you sort of been playing games? And do you usually mix between single player and multiplayer?
I've been playing for far longer than I can remember. But just in general, I mean, I started with PC games way back when. Started with titles like Fighter Pilot, which I recently rediscovered my original copy of as a PC title. It turned out it was a budget title, as far as I could find from my research. But the idea was it wasn't really that I was playing it necessarily knowing what I was doing or that it had any accessibility. I didn't know how screen readers worked or anything. Screen readers, if you're wondering, are the computer software that essentially renders text, on-screen text, and controls and other elements when labeled correctly as synthesized speech. So if you've heard of Narrator in Windows, that is a screen reader, but a very basic one. I now use one called NVDA, non-visual desktop access. But of course, that didn't exist back then. So I've been playing, games like that, literally nosediving planes into unseen territory. So, yes, and please do feel free to use the puns. I will not dissuade you from that. I very much enjoy sort of cracking jokes about it. I will not be offended. But in terms of how I got into it, that was basically how I got into it. But I played audio only games after that, so games that totally rely on sound or have very limited visuals as well, and they're mostly made for people with no sight or low vision. So stuff like Grizzly Gulch Western Extravaganza, that was 4-key or 5-key adventure in sort of an old west town, where from a very young age I learned about gambling, gunfights, and bribery. So that's a great start, isn't it? But then I realized that people weren't engaging with it. So, well, just in general, like people around me weren't really able to engage with it at all. So sighted people. So I then migrated to console games. So stuff like Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha, Tekken 3, games on sort of PlayStation 1. Partly because then it was good to be able to engage with my peers and have a good laugh. And, even if I didn't know how the move list works, because nobody could understand what a couple of arrows and a yellow fist or a green foot meant. Because, of course, move lists are very weirdly sort of coded, if you will, in terms of how they actually render their inputs on screen in certain cases. But then, I've gone on from there to, all through sort of PlayStation eras and Xboxes and other things, playing Killer Instinct. That was where my sort of journey in accessibility really kicked off, sort of playing Killer Instinct in 2015 or so and posting other videos to YouTube. And in terms of what I play, though, I mostly play, I enjoy single player stuff, but that's mostly because the single player space is where a lot of the accessibility is happening. So as I say, your Last of Us, your God of War, your Horizon Forbidden West, things like that. But multiplayer is slowly catching up, but I think it's mostly a sort of how can I best describe this? Developers being uncertain or unwilling to try and balance multiplayer and accessibility, which is a big barrier at the moment. Because, of course, if one person needs varying degrees of aim assist or audio cues or other things, and a sighted player doesn't, then sighted players may be either, at an advantage or they may be considered to have a disadvantage. So it's all about information parity and stuff like that. That's why I stick to mostly single player, but you'll often find me playing things like Sea of Thieves, Gears 5, Minecraft Dungeons. That's a fun one. Running around grappling skeletons with a fishing rod, because of course. And I do play. I do enjoy games where I get to shoot things in the face with varying degrees of firearms as well, virtually speaking. So I enjoy sort of games where I get to snipe stuff. That's why Last of Us has been a lot of fun, because I've played it through on Last of Us Part 2. I completed on separately on Grounded and on permadeath. So the game's arguably two hardest settings with no sighted assistance whatsoever. So that was a lot of fun, but that's a whole other story. Sorry if that's a really long answer. I apologize.
No, that's the perfect answer. I'm glad you mentioned Last of Us, because I use a clip from one of the boss fights thing when you fall into the arcade and you sort of running around the
the bloater.
Yeah, the bloater and the permadeath, and I use that as an amazing highlight of how great accessibility can be, because you're able to complete that without sight assistance, and I struggled with that on normal mode.
I never said it was easy.
No, but you achieved it, which I think is the key bit.
Yeah, I mean those fights. I think the hardest one, of course, I don't need to say anything other than Rat King in Last of Us 2. That is horrible. Not in terms of design necessarily. There were a few flaws. I'm not trying to throw shade or anything. There are a few sort of accessibility flaws within that fight, but I did manage to beat it in, I think, 8 tries on must have been permadeath, which was admittedly on very light per chapter, but it was very hard. It was very hard to do regardless. But the bloater, the good thing was I knew it was coming. That's why it was. That was why it was less of a problem. I was like, "Yep, I think about now," and we run. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fun highlights from those where I've either worked out strategies or been given pieces of advice from chat. Sometimes that happened once during the stream. So I think somebody had said, "Oh, if you stick a mine down by this door," I'm like, "Is it this door? Okay, let's try it." And then it was like, "Okay," and I was like, "Oh, these guys are all gone. That's good." So, and that's mostly just a matter of this is arguably full agency and accessibility in its early stages still.
Yes.
So I can't wait to see what what current and future stuff happens. Improving on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you sort of mentioned as sort of like Sea of Thieves and Gears 5 being the multiplayer games you play. Is there a reason that those are the two that you tend to go back to? Is it something because they're more easier to jump in with people or is there other reasons for that?
Well, that's half of it. People I know enjoy playing those with me as well, but it's really because they offer enough accessibility that I can contribute as part of an effective team. If you want to use an Oblivion reference, that being that film, it's like, are you an effective team? Yes, we are. And that's because, you know, in Gears there's a degree of aim assist. It's not aim assist as in you line up a shot most of the way and the game will do the rest if you're sort of close enough to the enemy, which is great, even if you're using a sniper rifle. But it does depend on the difficulty you're playing on, which personally I don't think is fair, because, you know, if I want to play on, inconceivable difficulty with that level of aim assist because I physically need it, you know, I can't line those shots up precisely because I don't have the vision to do it, kind of thing. Then why shouldn't I be able to? But, you know, that's a frustration point. But it doesn't, it because there's levels just above beginner, you know, which they tweaked while the game was still in on support, as it were. You know, I'm able to play a couple of levels above beginner, which is great if I want to really push myself with friends. Sea of Thieves, they're doing a lot of work in terms of accessibility. Even now, there's features coming into the insider build that are, you know, accessibility related. I can't talk about those, of course, because it's part of the insider program. But if you want to see what they're doing, I'd recommend checking that out as well, because that's sort of a constant iterative process with the community being involved. You know, I personally have been able to help, you know, with the help of my crew, a regular crew as well, with, you know, people filling in occasionally where required. I've been able to get to what's called Pirate Legend, so a very high rank in the Sea of Thieves. And without my crew, I wouldn't have been able to do that, which is a shame. But, you know, who knows? That's just the beginning of it. And I feel like, you know, once we see multiplayer becoming a thing that people want to invest time into accessibility for on a grand scale, so having these navigation assists, having audio cues, having, you know, whatever else is needed, text to speech in sort of for items and things, you know, for UI and inventory, then we could see a huge improvement, I think. But who knows when we'll see that? It might be this year, maybe next year, maybe the year after. But, you know, we're waiting patiently.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It sort of raises a good point. It's like, are there, the most common questions, the most common options that you tend to use when playing games, and if there's been any sort of like recent game changes which have made things something like a lot easier for you as a gamer.
I mean, I'd say the prevalence of UI, so narrated UI, so with things like, you know, sort of Last of Us, God of War, you know, even stuff like, you know, Minecraft Legends launched last night, and admittedly, no, the accessibility doesn't appear to be perfect, but the point is there is a way to access narrated menus. Dead Space Remake had it as well, and that's one of the big things I've been saying about for years. If you don't have narrated menus, then how are you meant to set the game up yourself?
Yeah.
You know, to your needs. You know, make that experience as seamless and polished as possible. Have it presented to the user at the start. But games are seemingly embracing that, at least to a greater extent now as well, with things like Read Speaker being able to be a thing. You know, Brock the Investigator. It's a fantastic little indie style kind of punch and click. They describe it as, which I thought was a great description. You know, when you load that up, it's like, for accessibility things, press X, and it's like, okay. And it's like, if you're blind, you want to probably turn all these on, and then all you've got to remember to do is turn off high contrast, which is a fun thing. I remember, as a funny anecdote, I remember recording footage for Last of Us Part 1 after enabling the blind and low vision preset, and I got told afterwards, why is all your footage blue?
Right.
And I was like, I don't know. And then I looked at the fine print for the options, and it says turns on all these things. High contrast mode was, I think, right at the bottom of the list. And I was like, oh, that okay. At least we know that's why that's blue. Okay, but I was slightly annoyed because I'd recorded about half an hour of footage at that point. And of course, if you have no sight, you're not going to know that's on.
No.
At least not without being told afterwards. But yeah, so narrated UI is a big one. Navigational assists, of course, we've seen those over the years, even with things like Gears of War 1 all the way back in 2006. We've seen, you know, navigational assists to an extent whereby if you hold Y and you're close to your human controlled teammate, you can actually navigate around, you know, based on where they're going. So if they run around in circles, you'll run around in circles, or if they run down a bunch of twisty corridors, then you'll follow. Admittedly, though, it's not necessarily perfect, because, you know, if you accidentally follow the AI, then they'll run around in circles, then you'll run around in circles, then they'll run around. You get the idea. It's not fun. But of course, we've seen that evolve with Dead Space remake, with Dead Space 1 and 2. Those systems back in 2008 and that sort of era. That was great to see. And of course, it returned in the remake. Dead Space 2 evolved that system, allowing you to choose what you were navigating to. So like store, objective, bench, save station. But of course, those weren't narrated because narration wasn't a common thing back then.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a step in the right direction. And now we see stuff like, your Last of Us, your God of War, your Last of Us Part 2, where you can get through most, if not all, of the game unaided in terms of navigation. God of War's system isn't perfect. I've had a few interesting, strange issues, and of course, the puzzles within that game do make for some sighted assistance being required. And in terms of how sighted assistance works, sometimes you end up using hardware methods. So sometimes you can use software or software implementations like Copilot on Xbox, where two controllers locally will act as one. So two controllers in the same room will act simultaneously as one. So I can be aiming and firing, and somebody else can be moving and picking up items and stuff. Or you can end up using stuff like Parsec, which is usually used for like remote gaming or remote work, but it can be used for online gaming if you set it up correctly. Or you can end up using hardware like this, which is the Titan 2. It's a small rectangular box with a sort of corner cut off it to an extent, with a couple of USB ports at the front and a couple of micro USBs at the back, and a couple of buttons on top, which I basically never use. And that's essentially to get round systems that don't have Copilot. So if you're playing a PS4 game on PS5 and you say you don't have share play, but you have Parsec and everything set up, you can rig this up to emulate that sort of local control setup through an online connection. It does introduce latency, but it's better than nothing. Because certain platforms you can't necessarily easily do that with. So having that as a feature, which actually was introduced in Forbidden West as well as an actual option, they introduced Copilot in a PS5 game, which was huge and still is, because it's the only PS5 game to have it. With that being said, it'd be better if it was a native system level feature, and I've been saying that for a number of years. But it definitely means that I can play alongside a sighted person where they see the exact same game, they have near zero latency, and they can help me in terms of movement, in terms of inventory management and all of that. And it's all simultaneous, so there's no need to switch back and forward with things like share play on PS5. So there's a lot of different ways to make it work. Copilot would be great to see alongside other features. So even if you have features that let you play a game start to finish without assistance, have Copilot there, because then if I want to show you the ropes as to how I play, then I can do that where you watch, and you can try it yourself easily without needing to faff about with screen share or anything like that. But equally then, if you were to suddenly want to challenge yourself and play blindfolded, you could, and there'd be no issue, because all the features and the bug fixing, troubleshooting and that are all done so that you can play it start to finish.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, you're talking about sort of screen readers being, or text to speech being more of a common thing. Are there sort of like common errors or issues that you find with them, whether it's like from emojis or speed?
Lack of speed adjustment, I think, is the big one. So a lot of the time, so if you get, say, if we use The Last of Us as an example, it'd be like The Last of Us, play a new game in a thing, and it's, instead of being able to adjust it, so it's like The Last of Us, play a new game as a new character, whatever. You can't adjust that, which is a real shame, because I use a screen reader at a rate that a lot of people are surprised at. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find a short that I put together a little while ago showing the speed that most people think I read at, and the speed I generally read sort of around on a daily basis. And a lot of people are like, wow, this is really fast. Or somebody said, I listened to podcasts at 2 times speed, so I was kind of prepared for this. But even so that was quite fun. So lack of speed adjustment's a big problem. Pronunciation issues are fun. There's a couple of funny Gears ones. One where instead of saying submachine gun, it says submachine gun, which we never figured out why. It just does. Or the hammer burst, for whatever reason, is called the Hammond burst. for again, no discernible reason for that. But equally, games like Dead Space Remake, there was, instead of it saying gameplay, it said, I'm going to see if I can do this justice. Instead of saying gameplay, it said Gumma play, which is not ideal.
Right.
It just makes it's, I guess it's the equivalent of maybe typos in UI or slightly blurry font, I guess you could say. Like, as in, you can still read it, but it makes less sense and it makes it confusing. I think that's possibly a good analogy.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Navigational assists, of course, not taking you where they should be taking you. That's a fun one. So it's like, I know where I want to go, but the game is just walking me into a wall. So, like with Gears of War, the Ultimate Edition, there's a fun one where you need to go across the street, and that you're up in the building, your objectives across the street, but the game's like the path of least resistance is actually right to this giant glass panel. So instead of going round down the stairs, along and across the street, you end up coming up the stairs into the big room, and glass panels here. You're here. You're trying to walk forward, and nope,
Yeah.
nope, can't get there. Nope, still can't get through. What is going on? So those two are pretty common ones, I would say.
Okay. But I guess those are the biggest options that sort of have the biggest impact when you're playing either solo or co-op, is having the text to speech and navigation assist.
Yeah, so even in a co-op scenario, for instance, say in things like Escape in Gears 5, which is a multiplayer thing. So say you were running off to get supplies, and I was following the little audio breadcrumb trail that game's that feature gives me, navigation ping escape mode. That feature gives a little breadcrumb trail that I can follow. If I'm pushing forward and I call, scions or whatever as an enemy, then you'll know. Or if I say, I'm down, scions are on me or whatever, and then what you're coming up to. And equally, if, I get, if I'm sort of dealing with enemies and you push up, then I can still follow and you don't have to come back and get me. So it very much increases that fluidity, that independence, that agency.
Okay, great. I mean, I suppose one question then is, if you're, I suppose, relying more on either on haptics or on sound, how important do you find like the directional audio for your gaming experience, versus like the screen reader that's happening on that's reading things that are happening on the screen, or other accessibility things? Do you find like there's a clash with those, or one's more important than the other?
I think you just learn to I think you just get used to it. Like, even if you've got, say, a tutorial message and your directional audio happening, or well, not even no a good example would be like health in battle, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
let's say you're invisible while prone, so the enemies can't necessarily see you, but they're shooting at your friends or whatever, like in terms of like AI, and there's a big firefight going on. You can still swipe up to hear your health, and it's like, okay, I know I'm on low health. Can I afford to use a health kit here? I don't need to. I can just make a run for the door. After playing the game for a while, you would know that that's a thing you could do.
Yeah.
And you learn to sort of work with sounds, but equally having the ability to adjust to those volumes as well. So with Ragnarok, the screen reader at points was overpowered by the rest of the mix. So what I had to do was turn everything else down so the screen reader could sort of stand out.
Yeah.
And being able to adjust all of that independently was great. Equally, though, I feel like there's definitely value in being able to turn up and down individual audio cues. So, for instance, the navigation assist, if you've ever heard it in Last of Us or God of War, that it's like this whoop, whoop noise, is the best way I can describe it. When you're pressing it,
Yeah.
it makes a sort of echoey whoop noise. But I wouldn't mind being able to turn that off myself, just to enjoy the immersion that sighted players get just from footsteps and stuff. But you can't do that. You can't turn that down on its own. You have to have all the accessibility cues up or none of it, which is a real shame. But hopefully that's the thing that games will improve on. But in terms of clashing, I think the way you eliminate that to the best of your ability is by having customizability in your sort of audio mix on a player level, rather than just having it be, this is the accessible mix where, whatever. Just give players options, I think, is the general consensus.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And then are there any other options that you find that sort of games are missing, or that you'd like to have that don't usually get added?
That's a tough one. I feel like, I mean, as I say, speed is a big one. Adjustable speed for screen read, like narrated UI. On PC, being able to use, your own screen reader, that's a big one that's been implemented in only a couple of games as of recently, which, that definitely would allow you to increase customizability as well, because there are libraries that will let you do it. But being able to use haptics for, navigation or things like that could really work well too. I feel like there's definitely scope for, haptics to be utilized in a greater degree than they already are for, for sort of things that you might want to use silently, for instance, like your navigation, like your traversal or whatever. Having those, including for, say, aerial takedowns, let's say. So you're jumping through the air, you want like a little blip haptically and audio as well, because of course information parity is key, to
Mhm.
say, oh, I can hit this prompt and I'll stab this enemy in the face from above.
Yeah,
Whatever. Like that's a thing that I've always wanted to be able to do consistently. Do those aerial takedowns from like a zip line or from a jump.
yeah,
Um, and of course, I mean, as you'll see in the GA Conf talk next week, there's an element of stealth that's not considered as well, which is when enemies are facing you or not. But
yeah,
I won't spoil that because, but essentially there are ways to work around that problem, but they haven't necessarily been explored yet, and that's why Black Cat exists as a prototype, to sort of illustrate those things, like being able to free aim with an audio system that's constantly active rather than having to rely on target lock.
yeah,
So if you've got, long range enemies or whatever, I want to be able to snipe from the same distance as a sighted player, just based on, the audio cues and haptics. We might see that improve as well. Last of Us actually had a good sort of workaround for that, where you could turn your target lock to just on rather than automatic. And if you heard, say, a gunshot or footsteps, you could, kind of manipulate your aim manually. And if you were close enough, the game would be like, okay, that's just about the enemy's head. You can, so but your crosshair is up and to the left of the enemy, and it's
mhm,
by like off by like a fraction. And the game's like, okay, fine, you're close enough. I'll just snap you slightly to their head, and then you can make the rest of the aiming as you normally would. So, it gives that sense of, I'm actually trying to aim these rather than the game is doing it for me. And actually, yeah, a big feature that I've neglected to mention: audio description
yeah,
for in-game cutscenes. Well, not just in-game cutscenes, but cutscenes in general for, you know cinematic events, like when you're pushing things around, or things like that, puzzle elements, for environments. Stories of Blossoms looking to do that, as we've seen from the demo. Brock kind of does that as well. But you can, Last of Us Part One does it for its cinematics, which I believe it was considered, the sort of stuff they already had scripted that wasn't happening during live gameplay. But I'd love to see an evolution of that happening, where it's part of the experience from start to finish, and you're not thinking, where am I? What am I? Taking cover behind. Because then if a sighted person says, "Oh, in that area with the cars, that fight was really hard," I'm like, which area is that? I've had that happen before. People have said, "Oh, duck behind the cars and do that." And I'm like, I don't know if I'm in the same area as you. Am I?
right,
So yeah, and of course, I mean, audio cue glossaries are a big thing. So, but have those including your enemy types as well. So, if you say, if you've encountered, say, like battle droids in Fallen Order, or Jedi Survivor, you want to know, oh, that's a battle droid, that's a super, that's an elite, that's a guy with
yeah,
a shield, that's a different thing that isn't any of those. You want to have that information be available to the player, at all times, because then, if you were to play as a sighted player and you saw like a giant red skull above an enemy, you'd be like, okay, I don't want to fight that now, that's bad, I am under leveled. And
yeah,
having an audio cue that says this is under leveled, but not having to wonder, what does that mean, and being able to go and check
yeah,
is good. That's definitely a good thing. But they're just a few, and of course it can all vary on a game by game basis as to what's needed, what will work, what what things might need to be added instead of other features. There's all sorts of permutations.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess with the glossary as well, would it help to maybe have visual descriptions as well of characters? So obviously for sighted players, they know what someone looks like, but having something in game
Yeah.
that actually describes them.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's always a good thing to be able to know what characters look like anyway, because sometimes you'll have an image in your head of a character and it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
Like I know I've heard people saying about a character who's say of a different race, for instance, and they think, oh, this character's one race, and then it turns out they're not, and it's
Yeah.
just based on the auditory information or any lines of dialogue. So having any of those clearly defined things would be quite cool. And then it's like then if sighted people are saying, how do you know if that's an elite or not? I don't have to say just because of the audio. I can say, if you look on their back, you'll see there's a giant E symbol,
Yeah.
or whatever, that kind of thing. So being able to have that same information, to the same degree, even if it's not necessarily easy to see, like if you have to be at a certain angle, it doesn't matter because, if you can see that, that information should still be available.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it's great that you think that that should be included. And you touched a little bit on you use the Titan 2 for your sort of parsec when you're playing with sighted assistants. Do you use any other kind of specialized controllers which have sort of more precise haptic feedback, or do you still use sort of standard
No,
Xbox and PlayStation?
I always work standard controllers. This is the fun part where I get to use props. So I've got one of these, got a DualSense, standard PS5 one. I've
Yeah.
got, hold on, got little brackets on the wall. I've got the good old DualShock 4 for when I need to play PS4 games, because the feedback is actually different between PS5 emulations of PS4 and actual PS4 controllers. So always bear that in mind. And of course, Xbox Series X, well, XS controllers as well. But I do like the old special edition ones, because as much as it might not seem like much to have a paint job and maybe a few scratches depending on the certain variant, they are rather nice looking controllers as well,
Yeah.
in terms of their design. So even just for the sort of feel in the hand of the special edition ones. And actually, speaking of that, that goes on to a slightly different thing. I think the closest actually to a custom controller I've got is one that I built with sighted assistance. I actually built two variants of the same one. I don't have it to hand to show you, but it's a controller I built for playing fighting games specifically. So Killer Instinct, I actually built it for. But it's, if you've ever seen a hitbox or an arcade stick,
Yeah.
so you've got all the buttons on the right hand side, and then you've got either a stick or various forms of arrow buttons on the left and in the middle. Mine is basically a sort of keyboard emulation. So you've got four arrows in the like a standard almost sort of compass configuration. So the left, down, and right in a line, and then the up sort of above the down arrow, if you will. But that's how I built mine as a custom thing with sighted assistance. But that's the closest thing I use to a custom controller, I think, and that doesn't have any haptics in because of the way just the board I used works. But haptics aren't always needed for fighting games, but Killer Instinct just doesn't have haptics anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. What I was going to say was a point we briefly touched on earlier was actually sort of knowing what characters look like. But in
Yeah.
terms of that, part of that is from merchandise as well. So if you said to me, what does Master Chief look like? I could actually, you know, know that because of these things. And these are cable guys. If you've not seen these are great.
Yeah.
They're very good sculpts actually. That, well, at least in my personal opinion. And I've got a few different variants of Chief. I'm not going to try and get the other ones into shot here, but the idea being they act both as merchandise and like an idea of the character, but they also conveniently hold your controller like
Yeah.
so. So multi-use things, and I do have a bunch of various statues as well from games. I've got an Ellie statue from Last of Us Part Two. I've got both of the Horizon collector's edition statues. I'm very fortunate to own those. But I also have. I'm trying to think. I've got a Soul Calibur one somewhere. I've got and it's all just because then I know what the characters look like, and they're very very sort of tactile to own, and it's not just, oh, I have a rough idea because of what I've heard other people say. It's very, very much a different thing. And even that goes, same goes for weaponry in games. So, as you can see, I've got the gold lancer behind me. Without holding one, you have no real sense of scale. Like, they're big, they're powerful, but you don't know, what they look like. I've actually got the replica of Thor's hammer from God of War Ragnarok. I've got the Mjolnir replica that they offered as part of the collector's edition. So, when people say, that's Thor's hammer, I now have an idea of what that looks like in game. And I'm like, that's very cool indeed. It gives a sense of atmosphere and scale and world building that you don't otherwise get really from just imagining it.
Yeah.
So, having that available, including, officially licensed 3D printable files. So not that you make the prints yourself necessarily, but you say, you offer it as like a free thing for people to, or a paid thing potentially that is, proven for quality, where people can buy, versions of the characters or the items in game or any of that to be able to sort of print out and understand what you're going for design wise.
Yeah. No, that's great, and it's something that we, maybe don't think about is having those more physical representations of characters or weapons, which is really cool. I suppose for us as a company, Prior Interactive, the accessibility is sort of something more new, and I think to be able to say our next games or future titles whenever they're out would be fully accessible for gamers who are blind, may not be achievable, or it's very much a long shot from our past and sort of learning about these tools and what sort of gamers need. So I think if we look more at when you're playing with sighted assistants, whether it's for single player games or multiplayer games, are there things that can be done to improve that experience of playing with someone?
That you raise it as an interesting question, actually, because I would have said, I'm not trying to necessarily say it's abundantly possible, but I would err on the more optimistic side, because if you're designing inaccessibility from early, like from the earliest point, then the more likely you are to be able to achieve those goals of being able to make it fully playable. So if you've got, say, consultants on board from the very beginning as to how to make certain systems work, or if you're implementing navigational meshes to make nav assist work perfectly, from start to finish, and it keeps working throughout the builds, and you just iterate on that as you design extra levels in, all of those things can definitely make it work. And because what you want to do is minimize the amount of assistance you need to the greatest degree possible. So Ragnarok, I only really need assistance with the puzzles and finding side quest loot. In terms of main story, other than the puzzles, that's basically the biggest problem. Just to give an example. And there are elements of it where I wish I could go off and grab other loot and things, but I can't do that without needing constant assistance. If, say, in one of your games you needed to go off on like a side objective and stuff, being able to highlight that for yourself and just head off there, grab whatever it is you need, come back, and have it be a seamless process would be fantastic. And I reckon it is very much achievable. But in terms of increasing the level of agency with a sighted co-pilot in mind, that's a question I've not had raised before. But I think one of the key ways to do it is having, your narrated menus, all the way through the game, whether that's inventory, whether that's text logs, whether that's, items, codex, whatever you want to call it, maps and things as well. Any objective updates, all of those kinds of things, the little things that you might not necessarily think of, but anything that a sighted player can read and gain information from is probably almost definitely worth putting narration with. That's one big example. Being able to aim yourself rather than having to rely on a person to tell you when to pull the trigger, as you will have seen me do in Horizon Zero Dawn and those kinds of games, where I'm just holding the bow and waiting, and then a person says shoot, and then they're a second late, and it's like, damn, we missed it. No. And if I could have taken that shot myself, I'd have probably hit it. And that's the thing. It's removing those barriers, those challenges, and getting people to test these features, feedback on it as they go. and iterating on that feedback. It's all very much an iterative rolling process, not just during development but after launch as well. So if you realize in, say, like a hypothetical DLC, there's an accessibility bug, you patch it, you add any tweaks to mechanics or anything that need to happen. Even in terms of like vehicles and stuff, having ways for people to drive vehicles without needing to worry about whether the sighted person's got enough, like a low enough latency to be able to do it, that kind of thing. So because of course that's what you got to consider. Most of the time sighted players who are working alongside people such as myself will have latency to contend with. So and trust me when I say driving or steering at high speed or anything like that with lag is not fun. We've had moments where those kinds of things have either nearly ended runs or caused horrible issues on stream. The Dead Space turret sequence, the infamous Dead Space 1 asteroid sequence, where you have to shoot all the little ones and they will damage your sort of little area of the ship. That was the only time we had to sort of do that off stream because the sensitivity was so high and you couldn't aim accurately because of the lag that it just made it absolutely impossible to do. And lo and behold, I got a local sighted co-pilot to do it, and we beat it within about 2 or 3 tries once they'd adjusted. But having to not rely on sighted assistance for anything is the best way to do it. Like, I know I know that might sound like a tall order, but if you factor it in as early as possible, then it won't be. I think is the best answer I can give you.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I suppose is that the thing you think game companies can be doing more of, sort of thinking about accessibility earlier? If there's like one thing or many things you want IOI itself to take away from this sort of call, is that what you'd want, or is there something else you want us to take away as well?
Well, I would say not only think about accessibility early and keep thinking about it, but I would also say get consultants, multiple consultants involved on a regular basis to then look at what you're working on, provide ideas, feedback, etc., and keep that loop going. Because if say that loop is dropped sort of partway through development, then ideas that you've had at the start that you might think would work might not work as well in the final product. And it could have only been 1 or 2 conversations where it's like, yeah, this idea won't work, perhaps this alternative version might. So it's think about it early and get multiple consultants involved with not just necessarily no vision, low vision, whatever, but also with other disabilities as well, because doubtless there will be other concerns that come into it. But the good thing is all of this is a learning process. So what you learn for this game will then feed into the next game and the next game and the next game. And, regardless of how close you get with this one, it will be appreciated if it's more accessible than the last one, it will be appreciated. But the closer you can get it to 100%, the more amazing PR you'll get, the more sales you'll get, because people will buy games based on how playable they are. There were people buying Ragnarok bundles because they were hoping the game would be fully playable. Sadly, it wasn't, but it was close. And there were people buying consoles for Last of Us Parts 1 and 2. And of course, those games are pretty much fully playable other than a few issues. So know that any and all accessibility efforts in terms of, that will make that game 100% playable will increase sales, and be transparent about it as well. So I think if I had to summarize it, it would be think about it early and often, throughout the whole process, not just development, but post-launch. Get multiple consultants involved on an iterative basis, be transparent about it, and strive for 100%.
Okay. Just a couple of things then.
Yeah.
But no, that's cool. That's great.
Well, very, very important things in the landscape now. Because, that's the key thing. Because the landscape, a few years ago, you probably could have gotten away with just having what you might loosely term as the bare minimum. So subtitles, color blindness, controller remapping, and maybe text size as well. But the point being now, gamers without sight have been historically left in the dust for a number of years,
Yeah.
and being able to be involved with the cultural hype around a game, if I, because the Bond property is the big IP that IO's being known for working on at the minute. If you said to me, there's going to be a fully accessible Bond game, I would be like, yes! I
Yeah.
get to run around with a watch and, tranquilize the people to go and grab a computer key. I don't know. I would be very, very hyped about that. And that's the thing. I don't think the hype can be underestimated if people know that a game is going to be fully playable, with maybe feature demos, that kind of thing, or
Yeah.
just communication of, we're looking at these things, we're working on these things, and people will want to help as well. That's the other thing. It's not just a job IOI has to do alone. It's
Mhm.
very much a job that everybody can be involved in terms of consultants, in terms of testing, all of that. There's so many facets where people can assist and help. So and of course I am happy to be a part of that as well. In terms of moving forward, I'm certainly happy to engage with this and see what can be done, because as we said, everything changes on a case by case basis, but
Yeah.
a lot of theories and stuff can definitely hold true. So I'm really interested to see where we can go from here.
Yeah, no, absolutely, me too, and especially because it's something that's so new for us as well. Well, A, with the industry, I think, and B, here at IO. So it is great that you're so involved and excited and giving such sort of great feedback and sort of advice on this, which is really cool. So thank you.
That's all right.
I guess kind of you mentioned it a little bit before, like with the online games, the issue of sighted versus non-sighted, of some people being able to enable lock-on or not, and it's sort of, if you look at that, like with single-player games, do you find that having that functionality of being able to lock on to target sort of reduces some of the difficulty that you could experience in the game?
Yeah, I mean, if a target moves behind geometry and the game, it basically indicates it's moved behind geometry, then I'm like, okay, I can't get that shot. Move to a new target, for instance. Or you know, it's not that I wouldn't aim for myself. It's just that most games haven't put that into place yet, so that I
Yeah,
can aim for myself. So if I hear movement, I'm like, can I hit this guy from here? I want to be able to hold down aim or toggle aim or whatever. Have an audio cue that indicates I can, indicates roughly where to move to line the shot up, and it's like, okay. So and then have of course, any stealth systems that say he's got his back turned, that's fine, he's not looking at me. And then you take him out, whatever. So I feel like lock-on's a good idea, but it's only a sort of stopgap to being able to fully aim. So if an enemy comes in behind me, and I hear that enemy, if the game locks onto it automatically, that's fine. It's good for some people to have that functionality there, but I personally enjoy the challenge of free aiming at times. So when I was
yeah,
using a bow at one point in Last of Us Part One, I think it was, I was using the bow to try and take enemies out. I was like, okay, so I got one, and then I hear a guy sort of moving up on the right. I'm like, okay, turn to the right slightly. Aim. Is it snapped? Yes, it has. There's the head and pop. There we go. And it's
yeah,
like, oh God. Okay, so he's now seen me. The other guy on the left. So I now have to free aim over to the left, hit that guy or whatever. So like it's very much, it puts it closer to what a sighted player would go through. And I feel like that's valuable as well. Having that parity of experience, that tense moment of, not just being able to essentially fire every single shot and have it connect, but have it be, how did I miss? You twitched, didn't you? For goodness sake. Right. You and your friend and the other guy. Yep. And that one. Good. Are you all dead? No. Where did you come from? There's all of those sort
yeah,
of evolving moments of being able to sort of have those things happen. And those are really possible thanks to not having target lock sort of automatically find everybody. There were moments where in part two, I was hitting enemies through like foliage and sighted players would barely be able to see it because they're like
yeah,
tiny pixels. I'm like, that's fine. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. But if I want that challenge, I should be able to aim myself and have done. There should be no reason why I shouldn't be able to get most, if not all, of the aiming done myself. even from like say a massive distance, like from I don't know, a couple of like a kilometer or whatever away. I'm thinking of like Hitman stuff where you're just hitting say a sniper shot from like sort of up in a balcony or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of enemies, a bunch of like people down below, and you've got to hit the one target in the middle. And it's like, okay, so I can't hear their movement from up here necessarily, but the audio cues being given by the aiming system will let me hit it. Do you know what I mean? Stuff like that. There are definitely ways to make that work with single player. Online, whole other thing, but I'm sure there are ways to make it work online as well. It's just a matter of assessing what's going to be the most balanced method to make it work. But I think, if yours is the game that does that, it will definitely be, recognized for achieving a thing that previously might have seemed impossible for a lot of, from a lot of standpoints. So, always remember that there's value in achieving a thing first in terms of accessibility sometimes, or being very close to the first, if not exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, no, that's yeah, that's super great. So that's sort of some of the things we can do to improve that is giving, I suppose, more control to you to do things like that, to line up the shots rather than us just automating everything with lock-ons. So no, that's a great point.
So same thing with like navigation and stuff. I don't necessarily want the game to just keep turning the camera for me. I want to be able to get that sense of I'm running down a corridor. There's 2 turns I can take to get round to where I need to be. This is identified as a shortcut. By an audio cue, for instance. So it's like I'm going to take the shortcut. Oh God, there's a guard there. Okay, I did not see you, so I'm going to turn and run. And there's a bunch of other people down there. That is okay. So I'm going to have to now retreat down the previous corridor I was in, and fight everybody off at once. Because they all know I'm here. So, the navigation side of it, any vehicle stuff, any sort of hacking mini games, those kind of things. Because, hacking's been done in Dead Space 2 as well. That was a very interesting one. There's a YouTube highlight of me in a vacuum, so where sound cues are basically non-existent. But haptics actually allowed me to do the hacking, which was amazing.
Oh, wow.
But of course, having audio would have been brilliant as well. But for people who say have controller vibration off because they have pain in their hands or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, even being able to do it without being able to see under those very tense circumstances was brilliant. So there's a lot to look at, but I feel like if you tackle things sort of as you go, it's going to be a lot less daunting than it would be to try and retrofit it, because of course retrofitting costs exponentially more than it would do to put it in early.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that's great. And like with that, I suppose with the audio cues, are there any either audio games or games that have handled audio really well that you'd recommend people to maybe to try out and sort of experience?
I feel like Last of Us is probably the best idea in terms of accessible stuff.
Okay.
I didn't work on the game, but being able to play through it with no sight, but still having those moments of I'm walking along, I'm traversing. Oh, that's a clicker. Right. Need to not be near that.
Yeah.
There's not exactly jump scares, but those moments of sort of anticipation of, did I just hear a noise or was that just me?
Yeah.
That's always good fun. So those games, and God of War, if you like something a little more combat focused, God of War Ragnarok, try closing your eyes and getting through those fights, even on like Give Me God of War as well. Especially the early stuff where you're maybe under extenuating circumstances, if you like. There's definitely a lot of mileage there. And if anybody has any questions, do feel free to reach out to me as well. As I say, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Twitch, I'm on YouTube. Come along and watch the live streams that we do, me and whoever else. Sorry for shamelessly self-promoting.
No, please. No, that's great. And so, so it's sort of the full directional audio then is sort of very important for you, sort of being built in rather than options.
Oh, definitely. And Sea of Thieves as well is a good example. I'm on the helm and I'm calling out, cannon fire on the starboard side, etc. in full pirate voice, because of course.
Of course.
And being able to say incoming, possibly a player. Oh God, okay. Or is that a storm over there to our west? That kind of thing. So being able to call all of those things out is brilliant as well. So Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, we're running short a little bit on time.
I know.
But so I suppose, is there anything you think we should have asked, or is there anything you want to sort of tell us?
Not that I can think of. I mean, the biggest thing I can think of is really just when everybody plays, we all win. Nothing about us
Yeah.
without us. The two sort of key tenets, really. And if you want to know about what RNIB is doing, look up the accessible gaming page on RNIB's website. And there's also, information about the player panel that we've set up there that you can find out about. If you want to, ask any questions to me, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, I am Sightless Combat, SIGHTLESSKOMBAT. And you can find my website as well, www.sightlesscombats.com. If you want to reach RNIB as well for additional advice on any of their research or anything, gaming@rnib.org.uk is where you want to throw an email. But I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes and hopefully discussing things in detail, sort of under NDA as well, if the opportunity presents itself. Because I'm always happy to assist studios who want to learn.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing, and it's been great to talk to you. And I suppose maybe one final question is, sort of, any games that you're looking forward to jumping into soon?
Stories of Blossom, point and click thing,
Yeah.
which I think I said I was in the credits for. That's going to be fun. Diablo 4, which I had a big fun time with in the beta, playing Sorcerer. Forza Motorsport, which has a lot of potential for the racing genre if the accessibility improves over previous iterations. And of course, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, because I'm a massive Star Wars fan and I'm curious to see what's improved over Fallen Order.
No, I think everyone's looking forward to that. So no, that's amazing. Thank you so much for your time and sort of taking the sort of calling with us today. It's been amazing speaking with you.
Likewise, and have a good rest of your day, everybody. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon.